Hello and welcome back to the True Crime Psychologist. I feel like I'm on a bit of a roll at the moment with videos. I'm not sure that I've got lots and lots of insights to post moving forward as much as I'd love to have a true crime and psychology channel. I'm doing a podcast with one of my colleagues around some therapy concepts, and I have some other projects that I'm working on that are more related to clinical psychology. But yeah, I'd love to try and to continue talking about true crime and psychology because they're two of my great interests. I guess if there are other ideas or concepts that come up, hopefully they'll present themselves to me over time. There are some ideas that I have around some of the portrayals of mental health issues in the true crime kind of genre. So one of the things that I probably will post a video on at some point in the near future is around the links that some people make with OCD and serial killers and criminals. Something I'm very passionate about. I am a specialist in treating OCD and myself struggled with OCD as a teenager. So I really get quite upset when it is incorrectly linked to crimes because, long story short, people with OCD are certainly not more likely to commit crimes. In fact, usually one of the hallmark symptoms of OCD is a fear of harm to others. Compulsions are generally aimed at alleviating anxiety as opposed to creating pain and inflicting pain on others. Very much a very different type of compulsive behavior to an OCD compulsion. Anyway, I digress. I could speak about that for hours. I think that's definitely a topic of a future video. But if we return to the Delphi case, one other thing that I have been thinking about, another thing that irks me, because gosh, I definitely get irked by a lot of things when I hear, I guess, myths being kind of perpetuated. And I don't think they come from a place of people trying to be deceptive, but I do sometimes think they come from maybe a surface level understanding of certain factors and things. So the point of today's discussion is looking at the unusualness of Richard Allen as the perpetrator of such a significant violent crime. Now, at this stage, we're sitting in limbo as the jury continues to deliberate. Given the amount of time that's passed, I'm wondering whether we're going to get a hung jury or a not guilty verdict as opposed to a guilty verdict, but I don't like to speculate. It's not my area of expertise. I'm still on the fence myself. I don't know about Richard Allen's guilt in this crime. But there is definitely an unusual element. Well, there's lots of unusual elements, but there's definitely an unusual element when it comes to his history. So Richard Allen, from my understanding, was in his mid-40s or late 40s, 47, I think, at the time of the crime. He had no criminal history, no significant history that we're aware of any aggression or, I guess, antisocial behaviours. He was in a long-term marriage to Kathy Allen, who's still standing by him now, and I guess from what I've heard through the trial and through some of the evidence, is very supportive of him. He has a supportive relationship with his mother, who really, from again the sounds of the limited phone calls and the limited observations we've heard around the trial, seems really supportive and loving. Some of the statements that she made to Richard Allen in the phone calls that were discussed at the trial just seem like the ideal unconditionally loving mum response. So no indicator there of any major conflict, I suppose, or issues in those relationships. Of course, that's just a snapshot. It's a drop in the ocean in comparison to their relationship at large. But certainly still, if we go on the basis of those interactions, there isn't any cause for concern with those relationships. We add into the picture that, he had an adult daughter who, again, on the stand said that there was no issues in her relationship with her dad in terms of any abuse history and that she loved him. Seems to report a fairly decent relationship with her dad. Again, I know that's just a snapshot, but there doesn't seem to be an indicator there of any major issues. The jobs that Richard Allen held were largely, again, he was put in responsible positions as a supervisor, as a manager, seemed to be fairly well liked by colleagues. No major reports of any issues from people in his past, at least not that I'm aware of, or none that have been substantiated. I did come across a Reddit post of somebody who worked with Richard Allen, I think in the period after the murders, like some years later, and said that they were actually really shocked to hear that he is now accused of this crime. They didn't necessarily say that he wasn't guilty, that they believed he could be, but that his behaviour was certainly not consistent with anything that would have caused concern when they worked together. In fact, he was a shoulder to cry on and supportive, and generally a pretty not standard even, probably like a standout person. Like, they really spoke highly of the relationship that they had with Richard Allen. So, I guess a lot of what we're hearing about Richard Allen's past and, how he has generally behaved in day-to-day life, according to what we've heard, like I said, not always the full story, but nobody's come up to say anything really negative about him, which is unusual, because if you think of Brian Koberger, I know that there were people who wanted to kind of talk about stories of, bad interactions they'd had with him. And even then, they were still fairly limited, but there were still people that came out and said quite negative things about him and their experiences, and that they found him creepy and things like that. We haven't heard that for Richard Allen, in the 2 years since he was arrested. And in fact, my understanding is that there is a significant proportion of locals that believe that what's going on with Richard Allen is an injustice and that he's not guilty. So he had a pretty good reputation. So this leads us to the point that people keep making about BTK. So the similarity is that BTK was arrested as a middle-aged man, living amongst the rest of us with a family and what seemed like a fairly, normal family, relationships in terms of with his daughter and his wife. I've heard a little bit from his daughter over the years that, there weren't any major significant issues within his family, with his own parents, with his own nuclear family, as in his wife and children. So it came as a shock to them when he was arrested. So there is a similarity there. Yes, Richard Allen's been arrested as a middle-aged man in living a normal life with his family. But there is a major difference too, because BTK committed his first murder at the age of 28. And that is very much in line with the general pattern when we look at serial killers and offenders of serious crime, that generally their first crime is well before the age of 40. I think with serial killers, I believe it's about 20 to 30. Don't quote me on that. That's ChatGPT telling me the fact. So going to be honest here, I haven't done extensive research, but I mean, when you look at some of the serial killers over the recent history, most of them, that statistic kind of rings true. If we look at Ted Bundy, at Gacy, a lot of the big serial killers, definitely did perpetrate the majority of their crimes, in their 30s, I think, and sometimes in their 20s, and maybe extending into their 40s. But I make that point that it's extending into the 40s as opposed to starting in the 40s. I did look as well, and again, not extensive research here, but I did look at, what are the cases of serial killers who have started their serial killing spree after the age of 40. There are some people, some cases that come up. Again, though, there are historical issues present. So they may not have killed someone before the age of 40, but there were other indicators. Someone like Ivan Milat, who was a notorious serial killer here in Australia, he had criminal acts dating back well before the murders, which were perpetrated, I believe, when he was in his 40s. He also was someone, again, who was regarded as very scary in the community. His own brother, not turned on him, but actually, spoke out freely about who he was and what he was like. So every case that I have come across, which is not every case, it's not an exhaustive list, but with the cases that I've looked at, some of the big name cases, I suppose, in crime, it's been incredibly rare to see a perpetrator start their criminal acts in this age range, in the middle age range. I just actually thought of an outlier just then as we're talking. Chris Watts, right? I think he was in his 30s, though. I believe he's in his 30s. But again, that was seen as incredibly odd too, because it was completely out of character and there was no way that anyone would have even predicted that. But I also still think in Chris Watts' circumstances, there was a personal relationship between himself and the victims. There was this motivation of another woman. Still doesn't make sense, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that motivation at all is justified. But I guess in the case of Delphi, we're seeing Richard Allen just randomly, after spending the morning with his mum, having a few beers, going on the track and going, oh yeah, just gonna assault some girls or some women, and then, oh, I get caught during this assault, so I'm gonna murder them, and I'm gonna murder them in a way that's so gruesome that would come in close contact with a lot of very graphic, horrible experiences, and I'm going to pose them and place the branches on them in an unusual fashion, and I'm going to leave no evidence, and I'm going to then go on with my life as though nothing happened. I mean, that is odd. Of course, if he is the perpetrator, then clearly he's someone that we're going to really be able to understand particularly well. But generally speaking, when we see perpetrators of very serious crimes like this, there are indicators. There are flags along the way, and even the most manipulative, skilled offenders, people like Ted Bundy, there were historical things that kind of made sense when we looked at it. Obviously, we haven't heard of the whole history of Richard Allen. So maybe there are historical traumas and experiences that again will play a part in understanding where things kind of went awry in terms of, you know, his like in terms of like maybe perpetuating factors, I guess, for the criminal acts that he's may have committed. But at this stage, we don't know that. I don't ever mean to say again, and I always have caveats in every single video that I do, most people who experience trauma or have difficulties in their life and even maybe engage in criminal acts as a younger person don't turn into sadistic killers. So there's that. And secondly, that we can understand context with these people and maybe go, okay, well, they had this and that happen that kind of helps us to make sense of why they did what they did. But that doesn't mean it ever condones it or really truly makes sense of it. There's so many unknown elements here that go far beyond, you know, blaming life experiences for committing crimes, because as I said, the majority of us who do experience difficulties in life don't go on to commit crimes. So it's always going to be tricky to understand the mind of someone who is sadistic, who is potentially psychopathic, because the majority of us are not. You know, we're not wired that way. So long story short, I don't think that the comparison to BTK is a very good argument for making sense of this oddity that Richard Allen really doesn't have any historical factors that indicate that he could be this really sadistic killer, and kind of a bit of a mastermind in a way, because he's been able to evade the authorities for so many years and really be in plain sight and not noticed. So there are a lot of oddities in this case. It's why that everybody, I think, is so divided, why there is such, it's such a polarizing case. I know that my videos definitely lean towards kind of supporting defense arguments and defending Richard Allen and casting doubt on him being the perpetrator. But that's not my intention. It's just clearing up some of the inaccuracies around mental health issues and psychology issues. I still am on the fence. I go between guilty, maybe not guilty, guilty, maybe not guilty every single day as I continue to watch this coverage. I don't sit firmly in any camp, but I do really think it's important that there isn't misinformation out there, and I like to call out inconsistencies that I see, and give a psychological perspective. So I hope you enjoy that. I think I rambled a little bit more today, although I think I always ramble. That is just me. I do have a lot of thoughts and ideas, a lot of hyperactivity in my brain. So I hope that makes sense and you can follow that. If there's anything else that you do want me to comment on from a psychologist's perspective, please feel free to comment below. I know I don't have a massive viewer count at the moment, but I have seen it's increasing, and I'm really, really touched that people have taken the time to like my video, to subscribe, and to comment. It really means the world to me, because I'm just a psychologist living in Sydney who loves deep diving into true crime, and I'm really glad that I'm getting to do it on this platform. It's really exciting. My channel will have other things moving forward. I still will have some stuff around my cancer journey, because if you've seen any of my past videos, I am also a cancer survivor. And ultimately, my goal on YouTube is to start a channel that is more related to provision of information about therapy, so that we can better educate everybody in society about their own mental health and the mental health of others. So watch this space. That will be the main focus of my YouTube in the future. But I hope that I can keep a little bit of this true crime stuff going too. I definitely like to continue to build on it, because I love true crime. I don't love crime, obviously, but I do love deep diving into true crime, and I have always liked that. So and I do think that I can have some insights from a clinical psychologist perspective, which we don't always hear in the true crime arena. So watch this space. Thanks, guys. Bye.